which gives us like a lot of time apart.
It does. It's
I miss you, buddy.
I miss you too, man. I'm excited about today's show. This kind of, the constellations and everything lined up. The planets were all where they needed to be, and somehow somebody said, "Hey, man, you look like a pretty lonely Republican over there. You need to give Michael Heise a call over at the Libertarian Mises Caucus." And so we were fortunate enough to just kind of happen amongst each other on Facebook. And today we have Michael Heise on the show. He is the founder of the Libertarian Mises Caucus, the Mises PAC as well. He has done a ton of things for, I think, over the past decade, getting out there and spreading the message of true liberty. Michael, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Man, we're psyched to have you. You're doing some really awesome stuff out there, and I think a lot of our audience probably already knows who you are. But I would like you to take a second, kind of bring us up to speed on how you came to the Liberty Movement, and why you came to the Liberty Movement. Like, if there were any really pivotal moments in your life that just said, "Man, enough of this ridiculous state, and I need to work on getting those guys out of my way."
Yeah, I was really young when I started getting involved in all of this stuff. Actually, it wasn't libertarian philosophy per se at first, but the first thing that really got me into it, and I think really softened me up to accept libertarianism, was I was actually into Alex Jones when I was like 13, 14 years old. And people who are familiar with Alex Jones now need to understand that InfoWars was different prior to the 2016 election. There was a hard shift in Alex Jones and Stefan Molyneux in around 2015. And, he was a big Ron Paul supporter. And but basically, I came in through the 9/11 Truth movement. And the big lesson for me is, like I said, I was 14 years old. So I was in high school. And at that time, when you're that young, you don't really have that many life experiences or paradigms built up to say, oh, there's a social problem with this. You know what I mean? So I had no idea that it was wrong to question 9/11 until I started talking about it at school, and people would tell me that they think I'm crazy, basically, and I'm a naturally very stubborn person. So my response to that was, no, I think I'm right. I'm going to keep looking until it got to the point where it's like, I've been researching this pretty hardcore for like a month. You keep telling me the same things. Where's your research? Where's your, you know what I mean? Like, and I kind of got a reputation from there. And that softened me up. I actually found Ron originally in the 2008 election. Ron, and that was my real entryway into libertarian philosophy, Ron Paul, in the 2008 election. But again, I was new to the internet. It was one of those deals where we had like a family computer in the living room, and so I didn't know anybody. So I had heard about him. I agreed with him. And I was going down that whole rabbit hole with a small circle of friends that, I knew personally that were going down that with me. And, but we didn't feel empowered. We didn't know anybody. So we didn't get out there and do anything. It was just kind of something that I took with me in my private conversations at work, at school, with my friends, all that kind of stuff. But by the time the 2012 election hit, that's when we decided, okay, we have to do something. Like we just have to do something. So in 2011, I ended up getting hooked up with a grassroots organization in Philadelphia called Truth, Freedom, Prosperity. And this was just a grassroots meetup group of people who all of which were supportive of Ron Paul, but there was anarchists. Mark Passio was involved with this, if people have heard of him. James Babb, if people have heard of him, was involved with this. It was being run by a guy named Michael Salvi. And what I did is I went out to the Federal Reserve with my buddy Kyle and started bullhorning. And I set up the little tiny end the feds to that effect. And it was just me and him. And then it was like me, him, and 3 other people. And then it was like me, him, and 12 people. And then next thing I know, like 40 people showed up from this Truth, Freedom, Prosperity crew. And that's when I realized, like, wow, there's like an underground world here, and I just hit the ground running with that and never looked back, and started, they did podcasting. I became a organizer of monthly events within Philly. We had access to a a army truck that we would use as a stage in front of the Federal Reserve building, and we would use it for, march events and stuff like that. So we did income tax events, and the feds, we did 9/11 truth events, we did, free hug type things, and there was all kinds of stuff like that. So that was my crash course.
That's really cool. You sound like the real deal, though. Before the podcast started, you said something that I assumed you were going to talk about, because that really anchors you as a true naive Ron Paul supporter in the very beginning, is that you were spray painting Ron Paul 2012 on cardboard.
We would go out at night, and we would, we were kids. We weren't driving. Well, I guess at that point we were old enough to drive, but we were going around and basically taking cardboard boxes from out back of the of stores, and then ripping them, breaking them down, spray painting, InfoWars on it, spray painting Ron Paul 2012 on it, and literally just putting them on trees, And at one point, our backyards were running parallel with the highway, and we found these big pieces of wood, and we spray painted Ron Paul 2012 InfoWars. It was 3 signs. It was InfoWars and then .com. And what was crazy was that guy that I ended up working with, I still am friends with to this day. His name is Keith Smith. He was raised in a very anti-tax household, and with a family member who's involved in the whole sovereign citizen movement, and he was big into Ron Paul. And he saw these signs and immediately got off the next exit and started driving up the road that runs parallel with that highway. And then he just said, you know what? The guy with the big garden out front is probably the guy. And that ended up being my friend Kyle. And so that kind of brought us into the Ron Paul meetup world, and we did all kinds of stuff.
That's an awesome story. I have one where I followed somebody because they had a Ron Paul sticker on their car. I followed them to their house. It's very weird, I know.
The craziest thing I think I did back then was me and this Kyle guy. We had found a pool tarp that was in somebody's trash, and we stole it. And not stole, it was trash. So we took it and we had some leftover paint from painting a room, and so we used rollers and painted Ron Paul 2012. And in the middle of the night, 2 a.m, we parked behind a Burger King and walked a mile to get to this bridge that had has an out of commission train track on it in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. It's called Trestle Bridge. And if you go under this bridge, you are on your way to Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is the biggest college town around. So we went into the middle of the night with the pull tarp, fastened it to the top of the bridge, and then threw it over and got the hell out of there.
Those are really cool stories. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent. How do you feel about those back in the days when you maybe weren't doing the most effective things, but they were fun and so forth? I have some friends who feel like they wasted their time, and some friends who look back on it as the best nostalgic moments ever.
Oh, I'm definitely in the best nostalgic camp, because it wasn't about whether we were effective or not. I mean, first of all, we were young and we were inexperienced to really even be thinking about that. But when I was involved in the Ron Paul thing, I said this in a panel discussion that's coming out this week. It didn't feel like I was I was helping a campaign. It didn't feel like I was working in a political capacity at all. It was something more like I felt like I found this underground group of people that understood the truth, and we were fighting to save the world. That's kind of what it felt like. You know what I mean? And I built so many friendships through that, many of which are, persistent to this day. And the environment was just so much different back then because Ron was a leader. And, we like to think of these ourselves as rugged individuals, and we don't need leaders. We're our own leaders. But that's not life, Leaders aren't necessarily rulers, and sometimes we conflate the two. And Ron Paul was a leader, and he pulled all of these different camps together. I mean, he pulled the anti-war left together with the John Birch right, together with the libertarians, together with the with the anti-drug left with the anti-war right, and it's just it brought all of these people together. And then once you saw that, you were basically in at the ground level of what I would what is still around today of watching the sprouts of the alternative media. There was so much stuff. People don't realize that like the libertarian podcast market today was nothing just 6-7 years ago, was nothing like what it was now. I mean, you basically had Alex Jones and that's it. And all of this stuff came out of the Ron Paul. Like Ben Swan came out of it, Kokesh came out of it, the Free Thought Project came out of it, the Anti-Media came out of it, like all of these people and personalities all came out of it. Just that one campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's had an overwhelming effect since, I mean, for me back in 2008, and to see this, I don't want to say it's a rebirth just yet, but I think it is. Like, we are in this pregnancy stage right now with, I think, this liberty movement again, and that is where it's finding its voice. It's got a ton of people out there, especially in the podcast world, in the liberty activist world, people who are running that, and really with a larger overarching architecture now. I mean, you look at what you guys are doing, and I want to get into the Libertarian Mises Caucus here in a second, but what you guys are doing, what guys over at YAL are doing with Win at the Door, you guys are all creating, this bench, so to speak, of state legislatures, and growing that into hopefully guys even at the U.S. level. But I can't help but be somewhat optimistic. I mean, pretty optimistic about what is happening in this culture war here in the United States. So with all of this being said, how and why did you decide to start the Libertarian Mises Caucus? Because there was kind of that time where we weren't, well, I wasn't optimistic. I mean, as soon as they fielded Gary Johnson, back in 2012, I've said it before that's kind of where they turned me off from. I was thinking, hey, this might be a good point to jump over and not be on the Republican side or what, and not that I'm on sides, but why would I go over there if this guy doesn't get the basic tenets of liberty? So why don't you take us down that road and why you started the Mises Caucus?
So where it started was I had been involved in podcasting. I had been involved in, after Ron Paul, I got involved. I was an apolitical anarcho-capitalist after that, because I went down to Florida. I saw what they did to him. I saw the whole thing. That's when I started reading more anarchist-oriented literature, and I was very, very angry. So I got involved in what every angry ANCAP did at that point, cop blocking. and it was a rush, and I was involved in writing. I was involved in that. I was involved in podcasting, making man on the street videos, all this stuff. And then in 2015, I had a series of personal upheavals that basically broke my heart and took me out of the game for, I would say, a little over a year. And when I came back, I knew that I didn't want to do the shotgun approach anymore. I didn't want to do that. Well, I'm going to do some writing here. I'm going to do some street stuff here. I want to pick a project that I'm going to stick with long term and carry it out. And I didn't know what it was. And at that point, I didn't even entertain the Libertarian Party as a vehicle to do that. So I followed the 2016 election, and I was pulling for Rand. I was hoping that Rand would be able to recapture some of that magic, and that just didn't happen because Rand plays the game more than his father does, and I don't necessarily blame him for that. I don't, there's partisan LP people who are like, I hate Rand Paul, blah blah blah, but I get why he does it, and who else is able to give anti-war positions in Trump's ear over golf? Yeah. Nobody. So that has some merit. But anyway, when that didn't work out, I looked to the LP to see what was going on there. It was like I was without any choices at that point, it felt like. And basically, I started seeing the strategic value long-term of the LP. If a candidate were to only get 5% of the vote, they get debate access. Or I'm sorry, if they get 15, the way the debate access works is if you get the debate commission gets to pick 5 polls that count, and you have to get 15% across 3 of them. And so if a libertarian were to ever establish themselves and get into that, get into the debates, well, then I think we could have a vehicle to basically recreate the Ron Paul movement every year. It doesn't have to be this upstart thing. It's a cycle is formed because we now have our own vehicle. Now, all that being said, it was very, very difficult to get excited for Gary Johnson. I mean, I did campaign for him. I did, work parades. I did work a polling place and stuff like that. But it was just horrible. Like we weren't really campaigning as much as we were fighting off defectors to the Bernie bro side on one hand, and then fighting off people who thought Trump was going to be something different on the other hand. And then, like I said, there was this hard shift of InfoWars and Molyneux, and that's when Cantwell really established that he had lost his mind, and like it was just a really bad, nasty environment and time. But that's when I started conceptualizing, like, if we ever did get debate access and the party was in this state, because Gary Johnson came close, believe it or not, he peaked out at about 12% in those polls, and it was looking like he might get it. And so then I thought, wow, like what would the first impression be of that if it was Gary Johnson and Bill Weld? So between that, like thinking about it strategically, and also thinking about just comparing the Ron Paul revolution with the Gary Johnson campaign. With the Ron Paul revolution, there was none of this, oh, well, you're a statist and you're a leftist and you came from the right, you're a Republican, I'm the right hyphenated anarchist. It just did not exist. It just didn't exist. And the reason it didn't exist is because everybody was with the program because Ron Paul was a leader. And even if he wasn't winning politically, even though he was taking all of the straw polls, he was going out there and making fools of all these people on stage. And it was obvious that they were scared of his intelligence. And that was giving a huge morale boost to all of us on the ground, to where we would do crazy shit like throw a pool tarp over a bridge or drop out of college, or, you know what I mean? Like, and so the energy was there. It just was not there with Gary Johnson, and he didn't inspire a movement of activists to persist and educate themselves the way Ron Paul did. So that is where the conceptualization of the Mises Caucus kind of came from, was to reignite and blow on the embers of the Ron Paul movement and get it started within the LP. Because if we could ever recreate that magic somehow that Ron Paul had going on, Ron Paul was just one campaign, and it got to the convention in Florida, and they basically cut the head off of it, and that was that. You can't do that to an organization. So the feedback, the positive feedback loop never has to end, and the revolution could just keep growing and growing and growing. But it's getting it started that is immensely difficult.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, and the fact that Ron Paul was an amazing cheerleader and leader just by itself. He did it in a very
principled
way, but just like you didn't really notice it happening. And I think that works through the principles when people keep on asking him, hey, who should we vote for? He's like, you should vote for who you think you should vote for. It has this more internal drive that you don't like, that makes like your gut feeling is pushing you instead of you kind of listening to what he's telling you to do. It's very weird. And I can see the value there of getting into the debates. I think if you had a Ron Paul type person to show the contrast between whatever XYZ Republican, XYZ Democrat on a debate stage would be very valuable.
There was one other catalyst, because as I was thinking about all of this, because ever since 2016, there's been a lot of talk of, well, Bill Weld should be the presidential nominee in 2020. And that is a very bad idea. And
it's fine if he stays on the Republican side,
especially since he's not a libertarian anymore. Which I'm pretty sure I heard him on a debate on a stage at the Libertarian convention say that he was a libertarian forever now. So whatever.
He said he's a libertarian for life. But I actually had a nightmare. Like, I'm not kidding. I had a nightmare one night where. Now, I was already conceptualizing all of this, but this was kind of like oh my God, I have to do it, and I can't let this happen. I had a nightmare where Bill Weld made it to the debate stage, and he was the one and I had a vision of him in a podium or in front of a podium, and there's all these people there, and it's like him just giving the first impression of libertarianism to all these new people, and I woke up and I just was no. That can't happen. They already took liberal from us. We can't do this. You know what I mean? And we can't lose libertarian now. And yeah, so that was the other big catalyst, and I'm really proud of the fact that now, do I think Bill Weld left the Libertarian Party shaking his fist, the damn Mises Caucus? No, I don't think that's the case, but I do think that our upswing and our explosion within the party contributed to a general anti-Weld sentiment that contributed to him leaving. So I'm very proud of that.
and rightly you should be. So along in starting the Mises Caucus, what are the tenets that you guys hold up as this is a no compromise? Like if you want to be part of our caucus, this is what the bare minimum has to be in terms of principle.
Well, most of our audience is anarcho-capitalists, because a lot of our audiences, we have the benefit of having Mises in the name, which like the Mises Institute, and a lot of their audience is ANCAPs, and there's a lot of overlap there. But we do have a platform on the website that I think everybody would like, and it comes down to the basics: the NAP, property rights, free association, free markets, and peace. And that's really, and we are also accepting of, I think we have found a solution to a problem in the party where you get a lot of these minarchist-anarchist wars and fights. And we actually have a very strong contingent of minarchists in the group. And the way we did that is by not taking a position on abortion and not taking a position on immigration in our platform, which the party itself does. And I think when we have those conversations in the group, it is handled much more productively than in the greater Libertarian Party, because with the party, one side already feels emboldened because their stance is recognized, and another one feels dissed, and it's like a clash over supremacy. We don't have that. So we try to put out content. And there's also a little bit of a divide between our political strategy and the principles that we market with, because our political strategy is all local. Can't really do much about the wars with that strategy. But we can put out our anti-war stances and have that in the front, like I think the Libertarian Party should, to recruit the kind of people who would likely agree with us in what we call a decentralized revolution approach to using the Libertarian Party.
Are you aware of the Protect the Guard Act that Pat McGeehan has introduced in West Virginia?
I'm not.
Oh man,
we have to get you guys connected. It is it's a way for states to have a say in foreign policy, basically saying that unless there's a constitutional declaration of war, their National Guard couldn't be deployed.
You can't even call them up as the president can't call them forth, and it's all constitutional. And I believe it's Article 1, Section 17 or Article 1, Section 8, 17 or something like that. And I'd have to go and refresh my memory, but it's a beautiful piece of legislation that's getting more and more traction. It's getting picked up in other places in other states besides West Virginia now.
We have a page on the website called Our Actions, and if you go to that page, that's kind of like a pool of activities that we are asking our organizers to pick and choose from to carry out in their states. That sounds like something that would be very good to add to that. I mean, the only other thing that we've had on the war front that we could do politically is basically write up a resolution to have your city council or county government condemn the foreign policy. And that might not sound like much on its own, but the idea is if you get a nationwide movement of people trying to do this, well then next thing you know, you might be able to get enough towns or counties in your state to where you get your state to pass it. You get a few states to pass it, then all of a sudden you're opening up a serious conversation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Critical mass.
No, yeah. Absolutely. Politics and campaigns and political parties, for that matter, are just a blank canvas, and limiting oneself by playing by the rules that are established. So the status quo, the statist quo, pun, is really harmful. Like you just said, we can't do much, but then you express how much we can do. Trump, who is very successful at lots of things, is very good at not playing by the rules and just dictating and creating new paradigms. If you had multiple states pass in their state legislature even just a resolution that says, hey, we hate war, or bring the troops home, or something crafted better with better language. I think that would be quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because a large segment of the Libertarian Party, in my opinion, has not learned the lessons of Trump. And in some circles in the Libertarian Party, the word populism even has become kind of a bad word, which I think is silly. Populism is in and of itself not a bad thing. I mean, it's just playing on the sentiments of the average person and juxtaposing them with how they are being screwed by the elite. Well, if that can't be used for libertarianism, I don't know what can. I mean, and Ron Paul did this. I think Ron did this in a very effective way, and I think he did it in a very even-handed way too, because he wasn't just appealing to the right or just appealing to the left or the center or just libertarians. He really did have a broad-based coalition, and that what Trump brings to the table, people. There's certain segments of libertarians, I think, who want us to be the reasonable alternative. We are the upstanding, respectable politicians. When it's like, no, we're here to destroy politics.
Yeah.
And destroy faith in politics and empower people's beliefs in themselves. And if you can't use that within the libertarian context, I don't know what you're doing. And it's just so culturally out of touch. People don't want politicians. People don't want the status quo. People don't want the reasonable alternative. They're sick of all of this. And while Trump might not be funneling those sentiments in the libertarian direction, it's a sentiment that can be funneled in a libertarian direction.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with the populism note, though I know what you're saying. I think that populism, the reason it's dangerous and people who are like looking long term, not that you're not, can see, well, it's kind of like a mix of democracy and some kind of benevolent dictator just knowing what to say. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, hey, let's be smart about things. Let's not talk about necessarily what's something really boring that people don't care about, even though it's important, Shane.
The problem with populism is the ends that people with power can whip people into using it towards. So like you see the left using populism to try to whip people towards democratic socialism. And you're seeing it on the right with more and more towards protectionism and nationalism. The problem is democratic socialism and nationalism and protectionism, not necessarily the fact that people have a built-in sentiment where they don't like the elite class.
I think that might not seem like a problem right now, but long term, that is why you have Bolshevik revolutions and communist revolutions and so forth. So right now we're just not in that paradigm, and so it's better to protect oneself in the beginning and say, hey, populism and democracy, these are not the things we want. We don't want this mob rule.
Yeah, we're getting damn close to it, though. I mean, in terms of looking at what the lay of the land.
Democracy's another story.
Yeah, the lay of the land here in the United States with this, aristocracy that is completely out of hand at all levels, whether it's the Fed, whether it's the politicians, whether it's the bureaucracies,
whether it's the state.
Yeah, or the state itself, or even these people who have been, titans and corporations and things out there in industry that have gotten pulled in because of the regulations and then knocked out the rungs for everybody else out there. Like people, I think collectively, as populists are starting to see that, hey, this is a larger problem, being able to put their finger on it and say it's all of everybody at that level. I say all of everybody, a lot of those people at that level who are extremely powerful. I think we're getting closer and closer to that. And I think whoever has the best messaging when that tidal wave starts to crest a little bit, that's going to be a very interesting time. And
I think Trump is letting a lot of people down who thought that he was going to be something that he's not.
Yeah.
And personally, I saw it coming. I knew because he even before he campaigned, he had always been a take the oil guy. And there's only one group of power brokers that you can come to the table with to achieve that. And you can talk all this, well, we shouldn't build nations, all you want. If your policy is take the oil, there's only one group of people that you're going to have to get together with to make that happen, and that's
right.
The neocons.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw that was what's going to happen for a while, and now all of a sudden you're seeing the ratcheting up in Iran. They're blaming the attacks from the Houthis on Iran and trying to justify what's going to turn into an interregional conflict, depending on how bad it gets.
Yeah, it's not like Saudi Arabia doesn't have enough money and people there to defend their own country. You've also got other players in the region like Israel, who has wanted us to take out Iran for a long time, along with Saudi. I imagine UAE is on that short list as well. They've all got tons of money and tons of time and everything else. They just want Iran out of that region at our expense. And the fact that we haven't gone to war with them yet, they keep feeding us these ridiculous, provocations where whether it's a British oil tanker that has been taken after the British take one of their oil tankers, or something else where they've downed an American drone, or now you've got these silly attacks on some of the oil fields or oil industry over there in Saudi Arabia to use American military might over there to protect those people, or at least to be a shield so that if they get hit, now we're at war with now you're at war with America. It just stinks and people aren't buying it anymore.
Yeah, and the Houthis, they actually they claim to have captured thousands of Saudi Arabian troops yesterday and got a whole bunch of weapons. Because that's the thing, is people don't realize that without us, Saudi Arabia wouldn't be able to do any of this. Because their military is a joke, and a lot of it is people just going in for money.
Yep.
And they're not well trained, and they're not well motivated. So they have to have the alliances to maintain what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, most of their cadre over there is former military, either NATO or U.S. or Australian or something like that, and a lot of times the guys that are running over there are Middle Eastern, or not Middle Eastern, but Central and South Americans. I mean, so you've got this weird hybrid where they've basically hired out mercenaries for their foreign defense, and this is kind of what's coming in. So when you see a lot of what's bleeding over from this ridiculous, proxy type war.
Yeah, it's a proxy war.
If we'll call it that, proxy war between Saudi and the Yemenis there, what you're basically seeing it is through expats type eyes, where that information is filtering into some of the guys that are still left in the chain of command that they knew from a past life. So it's no shock to me, but I'm really I couldn't be more tickled with the American public's thought process here, and they're actually thinking, saying, hey, we don't need to be in this war. We don't need to go and defend Saudi Arabia, and we don't really need to be in the Middle East. I'm happy to see it.
It's a pattern too.
Yeah,
because remember with Obama trying to go into I forget
Syria.
I forget. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was Syria or Libya, and that was a big rejection.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Every time they put it before the public, it gets rejected. It's just they don't care.
I mean, I think it was Syria where I think Assad had basically ISIS is about gone, and all of a sudden he's going to use chemical weapons and invite the entire world in. I mean, you talk about the biggest blunder in terms of a military strategy. At that point, you got it licked, man. You just hold out. You don't need to do anything else except let this thing die down, and you would have been fine. And nobody bought the story that I think the mainstream brought out, especially, what was it, Pompeo? No, it wasn't Pompeo at the time. It was oh God, I forget the name of Obama's SecDef, but
I can't remember.
I'm
less optimistic than you guys, because I see this tendency that man, I hate saying the American people, sounds so corny, but the American people have a tendency towards being like, yeah, we don't need war. Some for different reasons. There's libertarians because, well, it's just a bad policy and we're smart. But in general, I think it's far away, and there's enough of like appreciation for the troops that they're like, yeah, we don't need this to go on. But then you have Trump, who ran on that, who has a tendency to kind of want to limit war, and they'll follow him on that. Like he won't do something, he won't bomb Iran and so forth, and they'll follow him.
they'll oppose it, but they won't stand up to stop it. That's the issue.
Exactly.
Because
So it's like
out
we're
of sight, out of
we're
mind.
teetering on the edge. He can do whatever he wants. He like drops a Moab bomb and like they're cheering, and he doesn't bomb Iran and they're cheering. There doesn't seem to be a lot of, I don't know, thinking behind all that, and that worries me.
Yeah. I can definitely see that.
How do we get down the path of war?
Right.
We started talking about Pat McGeehan.
We were talking about strategy and so forth.
All right, I'll bring the conversation back a little bit. So that story I told a few minutes ago. That's how I kind of came to conceptualize the Mises Caucus, and then right at the beginning, I was also organizing an event in Philadelphia called the Philly and the Fed Block Party. And, we had Larry Sharp out, we had Murray Sabrin out, we had Adam Kokesh out, we had several cryptocurrency speakers out, and we got like 300 people out. And that's without spending any money to advertise it. So that's when I started to think like, maybe I can use the LP as a vehicle. And so I made the group, and it just so happened, this was pure coincidence. I mean, I certainly benefited from it, but it just so happened that the day that I made the Facebook group over on Twitter, which I don't use, so I didn't know it was happening, over on Twitter, the chair of the Libertarian Party,
I was wondering when he was going to come up,
started calling or heavily insinuating that Tom Woods is a Nazi.
Yeah.
And so, but this happened at the same day that I made the Facebook group. And so what ended up happening is overnight, we basically accidentally, organically absorbed the fallout from that gaffe, from that idiocy. And so we had a groundswell of like 800 people in like our first few weeks. And then within the first, I think, 2 months, we quickly became the biggest the biggest Libertarian Caucus group on Facebook.
Yeah, you guys are running over 8,000 people on your Facebook group right now.
Well, that's the Facebook page, but the real action's in the group. The group is over 4,000 people.
Wow.
And we've in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't sound like much, but at the same time, we had well, I'll get to that. So this started a conflict between myself and the chair that basically gave us a platform through which to recruit people, because my whole theory is that the Libertarian Party is at under 15,000 members right now, and there are this is a movement of millions. There's millions of libertarians out there. Why? And then if you look at the greater and broader libertarian movement, I would call the Ron Paul, the Tom Woods, the Mises Institute, the 10th Amendment, the Scott Horton, like all of that sphere, I would say is the largest and most passionate slice of the liberty movement pie, and yet they hate the party. And this was kind of starting to bubble up why that was the case. So we were able to flip the script and say, well, if consider, because everyone's like, oh, the LP's a joke. Like, why should we care? They suck, this and that. I think everybody, including Libertarian Republicans, would immediately regret giving the platform away if Bill Weld ever did hit the debate stage and he can't take it back. And so basically we're just giving away a very valuable asset to people that we detest. If you Google the word libertarian, as much as I would like this to be the case, it's not the Ron Paul Institute that comes up first. It's not Tom Woods that comes up first. It's not, any of that stuff. It's the Libertarian Party. So there is a element of this is what the average person is going to associate it with as it grows and expands. And so I think getting control of that branding and that messaging and getting it back on track to what we have already established works, like the Ron Paul revolutions, is paramount.
So what do you think of people who employ a different strategy and work within the Liberty Republican world? People like the Ron Pauls of the world, Amash and Massey and Rand and those type of people.
I'm friends with a lot of them. It's not that I don't think that we should do that. I think that it's hard to argue right now that the Libertarian Party is the no-brainer choice of politically active libertarians. Not when you have y'all getting 39 state members in Project Win at the door in their first shot. Not when you do have, the people you outlined, Rand, Massey, Amash, Lee. However, in the long term, I think we're going to have to build our own thing. Because in the Republican Party, you're always going to have to juggle opposing interests. There's a reason I think Rand does earn criticism. And his stance on Iran sanctions his own, or is that I got to keep bridges in here so I can stay in his ear about anti-war. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. You can never actually be you. There's always an element of kissing the ring to stay in there. And I'm also of the opinion that the Fed is the first thing on the chopping block. So why do we want to waste all of our resources doing that? Because fundamentally, the strategy I'm going after is I see what we're doing as a complementary effort to in a way, to Young Americans for Liberty and Win at the Door. Because I fundamentally believe that we can't save the ship. I think there will be a serious economic situation at some point. Nobody knows when. Nobody knows how long they can tide it over. But I think it will happen at some point. And I think when that happens, the move from the feds will be to politicize the pain of the people who are on the government dole, which there's more of them than there are in the people in the workplace, believe it or not. And so they will experience a lot of pain. The government, I think, will do what they always do and blame the problem that they caused on freedom and capitalism so that they can justify their solution to the problem they created. And who knows, they might even get cute and try to have a essentially controlled cryptocurrency or something like that. And basically, I think unless we have brave and principled libertarians occupying the states and occupying the localities, it'll just go along. Everything will just go along with it. And then we're basically resetting, we're rebooting the system. And that can't hold. I think when that collapse happens, it's going to be a really bad time in the short term, but it also presents us with a very important choice. And I think we need to prepare for that in a serious way.
So basically having a bench just loaded with people who are already active, who understand the tenets of liberty, whether it's peace, liberty, free markets out there, so that once the collapse does happen, you can activate a whole bunch of people in their local type regions to start leading an effort to not repeat the same mistakes as last time.
To resist, specifically to resist the new system, to resist their answer to the problems that they cause.
So basically resist another central government type of government. I mean, that's really what you're looking at, more of an anti-federalist standpoint, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the states already trade their sovereignty for federal dollars, and the localities do too.
Yeah.
So that gives me concern that they would go along with it, because how could you not? All of these poor people in the cities. What do you hate, black people? But I think that's what's going to happen, though. Is there's going to be a lot of short-term pain because they have artificially made people dependent by depriving them of a marketplace to thrive in. And I think it's all on purpose. And I think the culture clash is on purpose. I think the political division is on purpose in order to make us maximally dependent, and therefore maximally moldable and controllable.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you. Banks?
Yeah. So what does short-term and middle-term success look like for the Mises Caucus? And how are you guys? I know you guys raise money, which I think, if I read correctly, you're at $1,315 a month right now.
We're over 16 now.
Oh, wow. That is old information on the Facebook group. But how is that money being deployed for those success stories?
So the caucus started, like I said, 2 years ago, and essentially it started as an effort and was way recruited as an effort to unseat the current chair. And we raised enough money to fly our chair candidate into I think 26 states, and the chair position in the LP is a volunteer position. So this is like kind of nuts. You know what I mean? For a grassroots effort to fund somebody to get around the country like that. And so that gave us a whole lot of support. And then once, our candidate didn't win the chair position, but he did get on the Libertarian National Committee. And that kind of forced us to go back to the drawing board, because we can't exist. We can't exist long term as a Sarwark haters club, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, and so we went back to the drawing board on strategy, and that's where the whole idea of like, why don't we build a PAC? And so the PAC was only filed about 6 months ago. So that's 1,600. We've gotten that in about the span, I would say, of 4 months, and we haven't spent anything to get it. Now, to more specifically answer your question, we are what's called a hybrid PAC. So what that means is that we have one committee, and there's 2 bank accounts. One bank account acts as a super PAC. One acts as what's called a traditional PAC. So all that $1,600, that's coming into the traditional PAC. That money is being used to fund local level libertarian candidates around the country that are viable, so that we could build that bench up there. And there's nothing in the party that like this. And there never has been anything in the party like this, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I understand. It's a really sad situation in the party where people run and they're essentially completely thrown to the wolves. There's no institutional knowledge. There's no infrastructure, nothing.
It's very weird. They had a job posting 2 or 3 years ago for a candidate coordination, like nationwide candidate coordination person. I actually applied to it. Never got a response, even a nice email.
Well, they did hire somebody, but again, it's not going to do much good if the strategy is bad. So like,
no, but even after hiring somebody, there was a candidate, Brandon Finney, up in New Hampshire. Yep. He won as a Republican, then ran for re-election as a Libertarian and lost. And yep. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he was complaining about like he didn't have help or something like that. And I sent a message like, hey, have you asked the Libertarian Party to send out like a nationwide email saying, hey, these are our 4 libertarians who have already been elected, who are going for re-election. They were elected as Republicans, but that doesn't matter. You should donate to them. And he was like, no, I haven't asked him. I was like, well, you should do that. And then I contacted him back again. I was like, did you get a response? He was like, no. So I called the woman who got the job, nothing against her, and I sent emails, no responses whatsoever. And they send out emails. I got 2 today. I didn't get both today, but I got one probably a few days ago. I don't check my email every day. And they send emails. They send emails asking for money. They send emails telling stories about how it's Hispanic Heritage Month or something, blah, blah, blah. I don't see how they can possibly justify, we have 4 candidates in the whole country, and we're not going to send one email saying, hey, these people who literally represent, Brandon Finney represents like 4,000 people, okay? If you raised a few $1,000s, that's all he needed. And they couldn't send one email saying, hey, send this guy a few pennies.
Here's how they justify. And again, this is what I mean when I say if the strategy is bad, it doesn't matter. In some ways, it doesn't matter what you have. They justify that because there is a culture in the party that says, we should not be a top-down organization, like 95% of businesses that are successful. And so, therefore, the National Committee deals with national candidates and national problems, and the National Committee or Convention and the presidential candidate and all that stuff. And that's all they really work on. I mean, the person you were talking about that was hired for that job, she will recruit people, she will get them, help them with the paperwork, help them with some strategy and all of this. But, they tried to recruit 2,000 people to run for office last year. That's a lot to put on one person, and any one candidate's not going to get enough attention. And it wasn't even a good idea because they didn't hit 1,000 candidates, and 2, when you are resource strapped and you are in the position that we are, I think it makes a lot more sense to focus on quality versus quantity.
Absolutely.
So that's how they justify it, that we're the national party. This sounds like something you should ask your state party for,
the problem,
your county party. The
problem with that, though, is that the talent or lack thereof at the top of the Libertarian Party comes from the bottom. So if you're siphoning out, which is a good thing, right? You want people who are capable to rise to to positions where they can have more influence and do more good. If the party is siphoning off those people to be the chair and on the national committee and so forth, then you're siphoning everybody the most capable people, and there's not a lot of people within the party if you're talking like nationwide, and leaving the states dry.
Right. Well, it's a real boon to us. Is the silver lining here? It's a real boon to us because I have people, even influential people in the party, or increasingly donors to the party, telling me, you are doing what the Mises PAC is doing, what the party should be doing. And if you talk to LP members, everybody will tell you the same thing. We should focus locally. We should build up locally. And it makes sense politically. It makes sense culturally because, in this cultural climate, it's tribal, right? And you don't break tribes with good arguments. You don't break tribes with telling them that they're retarded for being in the tribe that they're in. You break tribes by earning trust, and we don't have that. How do we get that? Well, building from the ground up. We have to make the ideas tangible to people. We have to show people that we are competent, and earn that trust. So that's what we're doing. And again, this is just the traditional PAC account and the strategy with that. You know what I mean? And that's just only one half of the overall vision of what we're doing for what we call a decentralized revolution. So the other half of it is the super PAC. And this is how I think we actually gain that trust, is issue coalitions. Finding opportunities at the local and county level. And, if there's a good state level opportunity where we think we can hitch our wagon to and help get it over the top, then we'll do that. And a good example of that is, I don't know if you guys saw the story in Denver, Colorado, where they decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I got involved with the guy leading that effort before that was ever on the ballot. And he said that I was the first libertarian to reach out to him. And that really pissed me off because I've been keeping up on the science. Are you guys familiar with the science? Like what's going on that would even make it politically feasible for someone to credibly say, let's decriminalize or legalize shrooms?
Are you talking about the fact that it helps with depression and
so
PTSD and so forth?
Yeah, okay.
Being a veteran, I'm pretty close to this, and it's one of those things where a lot of guys have gone out to some very specific places out there that are treating through psychedelics. Combat veterans who have been put through the ringer, and the breakthroughs medically that they are, that they're saying they're achieving are bar none some of the greatest breakthroughs for this, I say this little subsection of America. It's incredible.
Yeah. So and it's astounding the results that they're finding. So I've known, and I've been following this for years now. I've known for a while that psychedelics and MDMA are definitely the next domino in the drug war. No question about it. And so it's incumbent on libertarians to get involved at the ground level before it becomes a wave. So like take weed, for example. The weed domino, it's a victory for libertarians, but it's not a libertarian victory, if you get what I mean. Like, it's not a victory that is associated with libertarians and libertarianism. You know what I mean? It's associated with the left. And we kind of rode those coattails, and we're happy that it happened. With this, if you have the ability to say, we can get it on the ground level, well, then they can't take it away from us, and they can't take our influence on the conversation away from us. And that's what I'm trying to do there. And it turns out that so anyway, got involved with that before it was ever on the ballot. And so what I ended up doing was getting this guy on the Tom Woods show. I got him on Lions of Liberty. I got him on Free Man Beyond the Wall, and basically just introduced him around town. And then we my organizer in Colorado got him in front of the state party, and they endorsed him, and he was able to recruit volunteers. So now there was libertarians out canvassing and getting petition signatures to get it on the ballot. And well, then it passed by less than 2,000 votes. So you got so you got to think that we actually had an impact. And in my conversations with the executive director of that effort, he is now referring to himself, at least a private conversation, as a libertarian. And what's going on now is he is turning what was called Decriminalize Denver into another effort called SPORE, which is the Society for Psychedelic Outreach, Research, and Education. And it's a combined 501c3 and 501c4 effort to educate people about the merits of psychedelic science and psychedelic medicine, and B, to support decriminalization efforts around the country. So now this guy has agreed to be essentially our point man. So I can go to him and say, hey, man, where's the good psychedelic decriminalization efforts? Oh, we got one over here, 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 and here. And then that gives me all I need to reach out, deploy some activists, get connected with the people leading those efforts, and even send money if we vote on that. And we're going to be a part of that from here on out. They can't take it from us now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and this is how you gain trust. We have now met them where they are on an issue of overlap, and it worked out. So now they trust us. Now they are willing to work with us, and nobody had to concede anything. I'm not a socialist because these are all progressives that are leading that movement, and that's fine. I'm not a socialist. I'm not going to convince them to be capitalists, but I can convince this guy to apparently call himself a libertarian and start marketing about liberty of consciousness around the effort. So and we just are about to sign a contract for our first issue initiative that we are launching, which is we are going to pay somebody essentially and give it to go into Texas. This person lives in Texas. He's connected with all of the gun groups in Texas. And as I'm sure you guys know, there's a narrative of the Democrats are coming in Texas. So what we've done is we have provided an advisor, which is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center. We're going to pay some money. We're going to provide ready-made language at the local level. And then we will also commit to recruiting and trying to maintain 8 volunteers to assist in effort to introduce gun rights protection language in 5 towns in Texas.
That's really all. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, to be able to do this at a local level and to have enough, I don't know, for lack of a better term, nodes, whatever it is, where they can touch more and more people, especially at local levels where you are gaining trust over time through association and things like that. Even, from different sides, like this guy from Spore out there where, if he's a progressive and he's like, hey, man, these guys over here that are, part of the Libertarian Mises Caucus, or just even Libertarian for God's sakes.
Yeah, they probably focus on Libertarian. Yeah. Like Mises, that's way too much for them. Yeah. Mises Caucus? Yeah. Who's Mises?
Yeah, they obviously don't know Mises, that's for sure. But for those guys to be able to say, hey, no, they're at least good guys, that goes a really, really long way in forming culture for sure.
It's actually emulating what Ron Paul used to do. He was making coalitions all the time. I mean, he would work with Dennis Kucinich on like anti-drug stuff. He would work with Bernie Sanders on end the Fed stuff. Bernie Sanders went away from that and like double-crossed him. And he would work with anybody on anti-war stuff. And it kind of follows just principles. It's like if you're focused on principles, which is decriminalizing psychedelics is just a principled stance of people are allowed to put what they want into their bodies. There are good outcomes from that. I have a little bit of an agenda with the next question, Michael. So please forgive me. There is a reason to the madness. It's not really madness in my opinion, but you guys vote as a body to decide where to spend money from the Mises Caucus, right?
Yep.
So I don't expect you to be able to give me a complete answer, but you personally, or would you even envision the idea of spending money to either donate to or help a liberty Republican, a Democrat who believes in liberty, and an independent who believes in liberty? So somebody who's not a libertarian.
Oh, I can actually tell you that we just fielded that question amongst ourselves last week, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. That's for sure.
It's a hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass. I mean, it's the way I look at that is it's nothing personal. It's not that that doesn't mean that I don't support Amash. It doesn't mean that I don't support Rand and all these guys. And it doesn't mean that I don't support y'all. But at the same time, y'all doesn't even support the federal candidates. They are very strict on they don't even support Senate candidates. They're very strict on we have a strategy. We are implementing a strategy to support state house races, and that's it. You know what I mean? And that's what we're doing, essentially the same thing, but with Libertarian Party local level candidates.
Yeah. So I have a question, I completely understand. I mean, did you want to follow up with that, Banks? Or
I can follow up after.
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So I'm looking at your website right now with who you guys have got on here, who are running that you kind of highlighted on the webpage. Who are you the most excited about? Who's running right now?
He can't pick between his children,
Sure
Shane.
he can.
Well, there is one that does have, he's running a local race and he has a national following and profile. So, and he happens to, his race is happening 45 minutes. So I'm the most personally involved in this one.
Right.
And that's Maj Toure. Because what's exciting about him is it's not just the race. In fact, the race might even be considered a secondary thing, at least from my perspective. What's interesting about him is that he has this theory that I've heard him talk many times about of the need for libertarians to have what he calls emissaries. We don't do a very good job of converting people out of different circles in our own. And so let's say we wanted to get the urban audience or the inner city audience. We probably couldn't even do that on our own. Not very well, and Maj has this idea of emissaries of like, you need people who look like them, sound like them, are known by them, and that can.
It's back to trust. Yeah, I mean,
it's back to trust. And his words are translated. You know what I mean? Because if you come in and you don't have the trust, well, then we're just going to get lumped in with Republicans or whatever, and that's it, and that's all. But to have one of, for lack of a better word, their own, turn around and talk to them on terms that they do trust. Well, then all of a sudden you start pulling people out. And I have never seen a campaign like his where literally the bulk of support in a libertarian race is young black people. And that's incredible. I mean, he's doing what he talked about and quote unquote translating this to people, and they're actually responding to him. So Maj has the ability, and not to mention what he does with Black Guns Matter is he goes into cities all around the country. So he has the ability to completely change the conversation about liberty and the liberty concepts in the urban communities around the country while there's a big movement to walk away from the Democrats, which many of them happen to vote for by default. So that I feel like is more important than the campaign. And then the campaign and him winning the campaign is just icing on the cake. I mean, that would be the second biggest political victory that we have in the entire Libertarian Party.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. I think his campaign out there right now is secondary to what he is actually doing, and that is just being parts of communities, doing. I hate to call it charity. It's more of just a responsibility that if you understand this type of thing, you need to be out in your community. And the fact that he's traveling around and supported this way through Black Guns Matter, I think is a much bigger movement than even his campaign is for sure.
And people don't realize the level of media he's already gotten. He's been on Fox several times. So right now we're getting locked out of Philly media, and he keeps getting on national media.
Yeah, and he just and I believe he just testified before Congress, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I mean,
he was invited.
He's got a great voice and a great message. I hope he's not only successful with running in Philly there, but I hope he's got much bigger plans to sit here and grow this movement and be, that national figure. I mean, it sounds like he's already on that path to be that national figure for a completely new audience that will be, a brother or sister to what we're doing here.
Yeah, and that's why no matter what happens with his campaign, his star is going to get brighter no matter what, because he's going to keep going. He's only going to just get more influence and influence more people. So that's a big boom, because there's nothing like it. Big L, small L, or otherwise, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
So when you said local level, did you actually? So it's only cities and county level positions? Yep,
county down.
Okay. So some of these, I'm gonna bust your balls just a little bit, and it's gonna come across that way. But I'm really curious about the how you guys came to where you're focusing. So some county, if you're looking at the whole country, some counties there's a libertarian who won, I think, in California, some kind of supervisor board, near LA maybe, and so he represents like 600,000 people. And then you've got, as I said, in New Hampshire, a state representative who represents 4,000 people. Is it more just so you can focus on one position, or is there anything to do with size? And from somebody who looks from outside, you'd be like, well, it seems like you'd have more bang for your buck supporting state reps in New Hampshire than county supervisors in California. Does that make sense?
Not libertarian ones. I mean, you already outlined it. We had four. Well, there was only three of them seeking re-election, and y'all actually helped them. Laura, y'all actually supported Brandon Finney. They supported Laura Epke, and I think Caleb Dyer in New Hampshire was the other one. And none of them won. So the party itself is not in a position to win the state house races, and we're essentially still a startup. I mean, $1,600 a month is good in LP terms, but it's not great in the grand scheme of things, and we got a lot of growing to do. So this kind of ties into what I meant when I said that I see ourselves as a complementary effort to y'all, because one, Libertarian Party candidates aren't winning the state level, and until I see something that changes that's where our strategy is going to stay. And at the same time, y'all just got 39 out of like 78 or something like that people elected to state office. So tying back to the great overall strategy of Clash is going to come, we got to get people in the states and the localities. Y'all's already handling the states, and they're doing it at a much more efficient clip than I think we could do by trying to get big L libertarians elected at the state level. And that's not going to happen until we are very well established and earn that trust from the ground level.
Okay, so y'all actually played into the calculation. I think that's smart.
Yeah.
Well,
Very cool.
It's the only long term, in my eyes, it's the only long-term strategy that we have is the LP. I mean, what's the alternative? Oh, we're gonna get Justin Amash to run. He's gonna get into the debates, and then all of a sudden we're a serious party overnight. We're gonna start winning federal races and start winning. Like, no, that's not it. And I think that I like Justin Amash. Nothing about, like, there's a lot of people that want to run. I would support an Amash run, but at the same time, we have history to look at. You know, the what I'll call officialista class of the LP will try to tout Gary Johnson as a big victory. Oh, well, he got 4.3 million votes, or I think it was 4.3 million votes. So let me break something down for you, and that's how they tout it. Like, and there is benefits of that on ballot access and stuff like that, and I respect Gary for what he did on that plane. However, I also said earlier that there's less than 14,000 paid members in the Libertarian Party. So let's just do a little thought experiment. Let's say you have zero. And all 15,000 of them came in as a result of the Gary Johnson campaign. That's absolutely not true. The vast majority of them have been here forever. But just for the sake of argument, let's say all of them. That's still less than 1% of the 4.3 million votes he got. And it just goes back to this argument of what is the role of the LP and what is the role of an LP presidential run. I would argue that, especially at the current state that we are in, it's a lot more about in-reach than outreach. If we outreach and we bring it, so we got 15,000 members, right? Now it's a given that as we grow, we're going to bring in people who are not thorough philosophical libertarians. You might get people who are disgruntled with the two-party system, or, oh, I don't have anywhere else to go to protect my gun rights anymore. Whatever. Let's say you get 5,000 of them in like that. All of a sudden, a quarter of the entire LP voting demographic, LP membership demographic, is like that. That's going to wreak havoc on who becomes the officers, who is getting nominated for as candidates. So I think we have to in-reach and to our own. There's millions of libertarians and 15,000 members of the LP. We're not doing a good job of recruiting our own people. So we have to quote Jordan Peterson, clean our own room and stop. There's a culture in some of the officialista class of the party where it's almost like if you're a philosophical libertarian that you are obligated to be in the LP because it has the name in it, which is not true. It's a very lazy, short-sighted, and dumb way of looking at it. What these people are like are something more akin to customers. And if you don't listen to your customers, you're not going to be in business very long. And it seems to me that our customers, quote unquote, don't like the move to cultural leftism and the embrace of identity politics that the officialista class is trying to chase. It seems to me that the customers are not happy with, the Gary Johnsons and Bob Barrs of the world leading our presidential race.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, from a guy that almost joined the LP, that's why I didn't join the LP. I mean, we
get it all the time.
I was not happy. I was not happy with the officialistas, as you'll call them, and I said, man, this is just another party with more, with as many problems, if not more, than this duopoly crap that's out here.
And so I'm acutely aware of the issues in the Libertarian Party. I just think that long term, it's gonna for libertarians, it's gonna have to be what we build up, because we will never be at home in the GOP.
That's true. I wanted to switch and have a little bit of fun. You were recently at the debate between Nick Sarwark and Dave Smith up there in New York at the Soho Forum, man. Obviously we got to see the debate. I was maybe hoping that you could kind of clue us into the feel of everybody, that was there. And then obviously you guys kind of had the after party. Anything interesting, happened during those times?
So I think the video and the audio for the debate doesn't really capture what it was like to be there in person. And the reason I say that is because that experience was cathartic for half the room.
Yeah.
Like I've watched a few, not all of them, but I've watched several of these Soho Forum debates. I've never heard heckling and commentary from the crowd the way that I did in that, and that's because there's a lot of people who have been wronged that are LP members and libertarians generally that have been wronged by Nick Sarwark and purposefully mischaracterized as things that we are not for political reasons, and that he's gotten away with it with almost impunity. I mean, the only reason it's not impunity is because of us, and now there's this. They never thought that we would go from, all right, we're going to run Josh Smith for chair, and now we're a super PAC, we're not going anywhere. You can't do what you do to everybody else and make the environment so disgusting that we walk away. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to beat us. We will get you eventually. And they don't know what to do. But so yeah, because of all of that, it was cathartic for half the room. You could feel it. There was palpable energy shifts in the room from when Dave was talking to like the low notes of when Nick was talking.
Right.
And on top of that, you had Nick Gillespie was there, Matt Welch was there. We had a panel discussion at the after party, and Gene approached me and said, "Hey, Matt Welch would like to be on the panel," and so we agreed to let him be on the panel. But here's the funny thing: is I've had a little bit of a relationship with Matt Welch for about a year and a half now, or a year, and never met Gillespie. Now the thing is, they came to that after party, and almost everybody that was there, it was a paid event. And there was over 110 people or something like that crammed into Gene Epstein's house for a offshoot caucus within the LP. First of all, I don't think that you're getting 110 paid people to go outside of the national convention to go to a paid LP event, period. So they saw that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I actually reached out to Welch the day after, 2 days after, and basically said, well, you guys see what's going on now. You see that we're a PAC. You see that we're doing something unprecedented. You see that we're, all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I'm not getting messages back from Matt Welch anymore. You know what I mean? Like the way I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them contacts that they didn't have to try to build that bridge. I appreciated that they had Tom Woods on there, and wanted to reciprocate. And it seems like that there are some people who are so entrenched in the faction wars that they would actually rather make the entire environment so toxic that nobody can thrive so that they can hang on to their positions than to let anybody else thrive. It's really nuts. But again, Gary Johnson came close to that debate access, and I had a nightmare of Weld being the first person to so we have to. My point is we have to get control of it. And I know I'm talking about a lot of the things the negative, but the thing is there's only 15,000 members. It's not a big deal. Like, this is not, if we can't get control of the Libertarian Party, you can forget it, like having any real impact in the federal government or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there might be more oh my God, Scientology members in this country.
Oh, I'm pretty sure there are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's not that big of a mission, in my opinion. It just seems like it because of how toxic certain elements in the party are. And we're having a blast doing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the other thing that's really key is we have an actual community in the Mises Caucus. You know, and that is difficult to build. You know, that's difficult because that's totally organic, you know. And we have an actual network and an actual community of people that come together, put their differences aside, and work towards this strategy and work towards the principles that we keep up front in our branding.
Yeah, I hear about the people who are kind of they want the Libertarian Party to be respectable, and while I disagree with the way they go about making sure that stays that way, I can understand why they would feel a need to pull back and push back when there's a group of people who kind of want control. And I wish there was a way to bridge that divide. If Gary Johnson was more involved and a better leader, I have nothing against him personally. He's like a cool dude. That just doesn't make for a good candidate. I think he could bridge that divide, because he is actually a cool dude. Like, you hang out around him and he's just like a nice guy to talk to. He's funny. He makes jokes. Like, he's laid back.
I have a soft spot for Gary. I think he gets a little bit worse than he deserves, but deserves all the boos and hisses.
Agreed. But then he also has that respectability that some in the Libertarian Party like, because it makes them, they kind of have a job because of that, or it makes them look good, and he wears a suit. And if he was more involved or had that, and maybe it's because he's felt so much hatred, sometimes from me, that he doesn't do that. But I think he could build that divide between the fancy libertarians, I'll call them, and the libertarians who just care about the principles.
Yeah, I don't think Gary is personally involved in the faction wars. I really don't. And Rand Paul actually crossed the aisle last year to endorse Gary Johnson for his Senate run.
One of my favorite things he did.
Yep.
Yeah. So if he was so ingrained in those faction wars, I don't think they would have been able to come together the way that we see on some of the intra-party crap that happens. But we're dealing with people who equate us to racists. You know what I mean? We're dealing with people who equate the Mises Institute with the preferred think tank for Nazis.
Well, hold on, Michael. Have you signed a piece of paper saying that you're not a Nazi?
No comment. I'll let you decide. I'll let you decide my character, not based on the conversation, but on whether I signed that or not.
Yeah, right.
We had talked about that the other day on the podcast, and we were trying to just like understand. Or maybe I was listening to Dave Smith. Actually, we didn't talk about this. I had a conversation with Dave Smith. It was very one-sided. He was talking to me, and I was just listening.
Right.
But I would love to get like Shane's opinion and your opinion of why you wouldn't sign the piece of paper. I wouldn't sign it either. But if you'd prefer to stay on no comment, that's perfectly fine too. Shane?
Oh no, I was just kind of kidding with that. So why wouldn't I sign it? Well, intention matters, and this was not an actual, this was not a big movement. It's not like there was this big bunch of people who felt like, oh my God, we're getting taken over by the alt-right. We better make a petition. It was just a small thing that ended up being used by one side in the faction wars to try to poke at another. And that's all it really was, as far as I can tell. And so then it becomes not really actually about whether one wants to sign it or not. It makes it, are you going to submit to me and sign this? Are you going to grovel for my acceptance, even though you've put out 1,000 some odd episodes of your show and
never
you're wasting Yeah.
Yeah,
You know
never
what I mean?
ever
Like,
gone down that path.
I'm more talking of just like a metaphorical like
Yeah.
piece of paper. Like in any situation, like I don't think I would feel comfortable signing or want to sign a piece of paper that anybody, like my sister, the president of the United States, whoever it was, that said, hey, here's a piece of paper that says you're not a Nazi.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you implying? It's like that joke. What's that joke that we tell people is like, it's about beating your wife or something. It's a question you ask people that's like impossible to answer.
Have you told people that you beat your wife? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's like
I see what you're doing
Well,
there.
yeah.
And like,
and I'm even
go
more.
jump in a lake.
I'm more conspiratorial in my answer, and just most of my thought process coming from. I came out of kind of a special group of Marines, and so it was one of those things where we did a lot of, deception and counterculture and all that kind of stuff when we were in. And when I look at Sarwalk, man, I see a plan. Like, I see this guy that is not beholden to the principles, who's more of a very, I don't know, robotic political type of guy who, he makes the case all the time that, we're not in the business of, the principle side, basically, because of, the fact that, if Dick Cheney's on the ticket, then you need to vote for Dick Cheney. Like, what the hell are you talking about? I see
they're
him
actually out there trying to recruit Bill Weld right now.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that they're even considering something like that. So I come from it like, all right, what he's doing is division on on his own terms, where now what he's done is made a radioactive party, a party that was gaining a lot of ground. And what do you need to do? You need to tone this party down. You need to put them on the back burner somewhere so that they are not taken seriously by the duopoly, so that these people who are leaving the duopoly in droves don't seriously consider this party, because they can't even get over the infighting, for God's sakes. And so for a guy like that to put out a piece of paper and say, you got to sign this, am I a dog? Are you going to tell me to sit and lay down next? Because I'm not your dude. And the thing is by our own nature and our own principle, I don't think this crowd is that crowd that would ever do something like that. I mean, it's hard enough to even get us on the same page, just on certain issues, for God's sakes.
But it's something that most people aren't Nazis. That's the whole point. It's like a almost global understanding that like Nazis bad.
Right.
Come on.
Here's the other thing. It's absolutely oblivious. It's tone deaf as hell. Can anybody here tell me of a time where apologizing and or capitulating to the cancel culture or the culture mob has worked out for anybody?
Yeah, it doesn't.
No, that's not what people are looking for. The only people who are looking for that are ideologically possessed people on the left and on the right.
But even if you apologize, you don't win after that.
Well, and I think
you were just forgotten and told that you have now submitted to the SJWs.
And I think Trump, and I hate to ever, hold this guy up for whatever
reason. He's good
reason.
at lots of things, man.
He is absolutely good at just whenever they think they're going to get an apology out of this guy, he socks them in the other side of their face, and there's no backing down ever, not a single inch with any of this from what the principles of liberty are.
Well, that being said, I think that if you're just apologizing all the time for things that you shouldn't be apologizing for, it takes away from apology, because a real apology is a good thing. And I'll use the example that I use every single time, even though I've just forgotten his name. Who's the congressman for North Carolina?
That died. Walter Bullock?
Walter
Jones. Yeah, Walter Jones.
Walter Jones apologized. That's like in many, many ways for voting for the war, supporting the war, and all that kind of stuff.
Serious action on top of it.
That's a real apology, right?
Yeah, but you don't get
mean
a
it and you follow
apology.
behind
it. But that's a genuine apology from like something that happened inside of himself.
Yeah,
that's a little bit different than trying to push somebody around and say, you better apologize for my issue here that I want you. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. They set up a power play by trying to poke somebody.
Yeah,
and you're just going to put somebody on the defensive about that if you go about things that way. And I think what ended up happening there was inevitable. What they did not expect to happen was for fate to have it that a Facebook group would be made at the exact time that this was happening to basically, fund a revolt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey man, we're coming up on an hour and a half here, and we like to keep it fun and everything at the end of the show. I want to give you a few minutes first and foremost. If you had 2 minutes, talk people in this audience into the Libertarian Mises Caucus.
Okay, so I think the Libertarian Party is going to have to be the thing long term that differentiates ourselves philosophically and politically in the greater American culture. And I think we are holding ourselves back by the Republican Party being the primary means of doing that. We're assimilating with them, and they're trying to primary our people. They're trying to make it not welcome. They changed the rules on Ron Paul. They're primarying Amash, trying to primary Massey. Rand has made significant compromises that, in my opinion, are for a reason to maintain his position. So we'll never be at home. We'll never be able to not juggle opposing interests to stay in the GOP. So, and not to mention, the federal government is the first thing on the chopping block. It's the first thing that's going to go bankrupt. So I think we have the most effect in our own communities. I think we have the most influence on our own communities. And I think that's how we build that trust. And I think creating a network of trust across the country, as opposed to building a network of political power from the top down across the country, is how we're going to really actually get to the core of changing hearts and minds and replacing the ideology. It says, quote Mises, replacing the ideology that generates war with one that replaces peace. It's not going to be done through political power per se. And to the extent that we get political power, it should be off of the fact that we have converted people into that way of thinking. So if you agree with me on that, then you should join. You should look for the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus group on Facebook. You should go to takehumanaction.com and sign up on our email list. And you should go to misespac.com and become a recurring donor for as little as $5, because this is what we've got to work with. I don't have any illusions that the Libertarian Party is not flawed, but it's also not beyond redemption. And I think if a very, very, very small percentage of the libertarian community actually took this seriously, it would be a lot more swift than you could imagine.
I love it. The last thing we do to keep it fun is a few questions, just a lightning round, real quick answers. No wrong answers. Everybody's judging you, if you don't mind. What's your favorite book or author or type of reading?
Oh, I'm biased. Ron Paul.
Yeah. What book?
Yeah. I really liked A Foreign Policy of Freedom. And I really think that A Foreign Policy of Freedom and Pillars of Prosperity are two books that all politically active libertarians ought to read, because Ron Paul is such a unique beast in that he fused the intellectual aspect of it, the philosophical aspect of it, the scholarly aspect of it that we all love so much, with the political aspect, and he did it at a very high level for a very long time. And so I almost feel like those are blueprints on how to maintain your principles in the statist environment.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite news organization out there, Counterculture or something?
Well, again, I'm biased. The Mises Institute, all of that stuff. I'm a homer, man. What can I say? But I would say, but I will say on a different tip. And I think this goes in the counterculture. Somebody who in the past 2 years has entered the same tier, in my opinion, as Ron Paul, just in a different way, is Jordan Peterson. I think Jordan Peterson might very well be the most important person in the world right now, because one thing that I think the Libertarian Party has lost, and I think we are as a movement starting to lose, is the axiomatic relationship between freedom and responsibility. And Jordan Peterson, he's not out there calling himself a libertarian, and what he's about is not primarily political, but he is out there calling himself a classical liberal. He's out there espousing our principles as truth,
right,
without getting into the ideological weeds of it. But the core of his message, what has made him I think he sold 3 million copies of that book in about a year. What's making it so that all of his shows, no matter where he goes in the world, sell out, is the core of his message is about adopting responsibility. And the bigger the responsibility that you will adopt, and you can overcome the dark times in your life that will come, no matter what. And because that's what makes up the basis of reality itself. That is not that different from freedom, because freedom is responsibility.
Yep.
And so I think that audience is primed to hear us. And I also think Jordan Peterson is blowing up because of the a priori argumentation that he is putting out there about the concepts that he's covering. And I think people are clicking because it's being presented in an a priori way, which means that he is ripe, if he has never looked into it, to understand Austrian economics. And a Jordan Peterson that understands the Austrian theory of the business cycle is a monster. Is an absolute monster.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you. Last question, all the marbles, cats or dogs?
That's gotten really tough the past year, because I've always been a dog guy growing up, and now me and my girl, ever since me and my girlfriend moved in, we got cats, and my cat gadgets.
I hear you.
I mean, the real good answer to that is like all animals are awesome.
No, I love it.
Cats are just a little better than the dogs.
I want to thank you, Mike, for coming in and doing this on a Sunday, man. I've really enjoyed the time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing over there at the Mises Caucus and the PACs over there. Keep up the great work, and thanks again for spending a little time with us and getting to know our audience here. If you would like to send anything to the Rebellion, you can go to info@rebellionpod.com. We need all the reviews we can get, so whatever platform you're listening on, go on, leave a 5-star review. We'll read it here, and that'll push us to the top of the algorithms out there. If you found value in the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/rebellionpod. Mike, thanks again, man, for making this time. Thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. This has been your place for peace, liberty, and free markets. We need you. We love you.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.